Well, it is the morning after President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, and to help us digest everything, ENCA is hosting a briefing. The meeting is being attended by political and business leaders. Let's go live now to my colleague Vuyo Mvoko. Vuyo, good morning, and I suppose we're asking, what do people have an appetite for this morning after the State of the Nation address?
Thank you, Yuveka. It is indeed the morning after, and what we're going to try and do over the next couple of hours is to unpack the State of the Nation address that was delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa last night. And to help me do that, I'm joined here by the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan. Welcome, Minister. Thanks very much for coming through. We're also joined by Business Unity South Africa's President, Sipho Pityana. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
We have Karima Brown, our own resident political analyst. Thanks to all of you for coming through this morning. We're also joined by various people from political parties, but also civil society organizations, organized labor, as well as some invited guests. I welcome you all to this special broadcast. I will start with you, Minister. I mean, you will have been part of the process that led to yesterday's, to everything that went into last night's State of the Nation address. As you said at the Cabinet, Lekgotla, what was it that as government, as the executive, I should say, that you actually wanted to tell South Africans? What was foremost in your thoughts? What did you want to tell South Africa?
Well, that's the President's prerogative, but let me share a few of the thoughts that all of us would have had, both as the governing party, but also as the South African public. The first is, as the President said, the time for talking is over. The second is we need to get down to action and implementation of ideas. There's no shortage of ideas. The third is that we need to focus on a few areas and do well at those areas. Amongst those areas would be the economy, and to generate confidence in the economy again, to generate more investment in the economy, and to ensure that in the next 5 to 10 years it grows at a faster pace on the one hand, but more inclusively on the other hand. The fourth, in relation to that, is the question of jobs for young people. I think every political formation would have ideas, and we as a society should be very concerned at the high level of youth unemployment. And there's a huge determination to use both government facilities but also private sector in order to make sure that the youth have confidence in our system and that both the private sector and the government can actually deliver. And of course, the importance of dreaming. Because if we don't have a sense of vision about where we want to take the country, if we don't have a sense of new ideas about what we want to do differently, and in the case of the President last night, he talked about a new city, which we might regard as a flippant idea, but the important thing is that after 25 years of democracy, the majority of our people still live exactly where they lived 30 years ago. Not much has changed for them. And the focus on living conditions, the focus on revitalizing cities or towns, both in rural areas and urban areas, and the proximity or densification of in cities are absolutely key lessons we can learn from elsewhere in the world, because with it comes opportunities for young people to move on. We often talk about jobs, but the other is that we need to generate a higher level of entrepreneurship within our society as well. And amongst the established business sector, I think a mindset change, so I'm glad to see Mr. Pityana here, a mindset change which says, how do we collaborate in this venture? Because at the end of the day, the call was, let's work together. Let's make this a set of issues of common purpose. And if we do, we have very great prospects in the next 5 to 10 years.
Sipho Pityana, did you get a sense that indeed the time for talking is over?
Well, as you know, business is quite enthusiastic with the current leadership, and business is keen to support what government does and what it stands for. The speech by the President yesterday had a lot of feel-good effect. What it lacked was a sense of crisis and urgency in the economy and what we need to do. The reality of the matter is that we have a runaway public sector wage bill that is imposing a huge burden on the fiscus. We have excessive expenditure that is also driven by corruption and excessive charges that are imposed on the state through procurement systems that are inefficient and inadequate. We have state-owned entities that are in paralysis, if you like, across the board. And this goes beyond SOEs that are reporting to the Minister of Public Enterprises.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
But across the board, we have two things around ESCOM. We have a new board and a new executive that put on the table a set of proposals of what you need to do to fix that place, and a technical team that was appointed that put forward a set of recommendations, both of which are consistent. The reality of the matter is that what they've put on the table requires political will and resolution to actually deal with those. It's not something that Labour would receive happily. It's not things that business would receive happily, because remember, when you cut spending on the public sector, it also affects business procurement of services to those entities. So all of us are online to actually lose contracts, to lose jobs, to lose a range of things. But the reality of the matter is that that's where we are. So a promise that you're going to throw money here, there, and everywhere from coffers of the state that are in crisis is not a direction that we think we should be talking about. We need to get everybody awoke to a sense of economic crisis that we're faced with. We have to take some very hard decisions to pull back spending across a range of sectors. We're very pleased that the President has re-emphasized the tone of anti-corruption, anti-state capture, ethical leadership, and so on. But it leaves us with something of a bitter taste to look at that statement and a great deal of progress that was made over the past year in cleaning up the state system and some of the measures that we applauded the President for. And one of the key and critical institutions in Parliament that's supposed to provide oversight appoints a rogues gallery in chairing of critical committees of Parliament. How on earth do you put a Faith Mutambi, who presided over the collapse and paralysis that we still are reeling over at SABC? How do you put a Musebenzi Zwane, who is now going to look after transport, which is a key sector in the economy, that did huge mess in Free State and as a Minister of Mineral Resources? I can go down the list. This is a set of unethical leaders who are supposed to play a leadership role in a critical institutions of the state that Parliament is. It's an affront to society. It's a betrayal. And I would hope that the leadership of government would have a moment to reflect on that and rethink some of those decisions. So we need to set the tone on ethical leadership across the board. We need to set the tone and so that we can call out unethical conduct in business and elsewhere in society. But if no less a body than Parliament is happy to affirm people that the nation perceives as unethical and corrupt, that is very problematic. Parliament has been, over the period of 10 years of the Zuma administration, has been used to endorse and rubber stamp the kind of conduct in society that has landed us where we are. So the signal that is coming through with some of these appointments suggests that we're going to have more of the same. And I hope that we're all going to wake up to confront this. So it's clear that we have a leadership, a refreshing leadership in the President, but we are not yet where we need to be to actually speak to some of the key challenges that we have to face. We're very excited about emphasis on education. We're very excited about spectrum. We need to move urgently on spectrum, because if we don't move on spectrum with the urgency that is necessary, that sector is one of the key catalysts in shifting the economy. Let us not make false promises to young people. We are in a phase of the economy that is going to be shedding jobs. That's the reality of the matter, in public sector and the private sector, and it's going to affect all of us. Such steps as we take around these things are mitigative steps. So in the fixing period that we are going to go through, there's going to be a great deal of shedding of jobs, and we need to manage how we mitigate that in order to reposition the economy to sustainably create jobs, grow, and in an inclusive fashion.
Karima Brown, your thoughts?
You know, there were two things for me that stood out from the president last night. Was he wasn't missing the opportunity to use a crisis to create an opportunity, and that was what was implicit in the subtext of what he was saying. He wasn't running away from the severe crisis, for example, on youth unemployment. He called it a national crisis, but he spoke to what can be possible if we have a fresh and innovative approach to dealing with some of these issues. And of course, the idea of building a city that defies apartheid social planning, that creates the kind of integrated development that is so sorely lacking was there. But what is the context in which he's trying to do this? And I think that's what Dr. Pichana was speaking of, for example. So where will the biggest threat to turning this crisis into an opportunity come from? And sadly, the biggest threat to this opportunity, this crisis becoming an opportunity, comes from within the African National Congress itself. There is a group of people, among them the people that Mr. Pichana mentioned, together with elements in other parties who have benefited off the largesse of the state, that is trying to launch an enormous fight-back campaign. So suddenly, for example, you have the EFF who apologized to the nation for backing Busisiwe Mkhwebane a few months ago, now suddenly becoming the biggest praise singer of a woman who has essentially been found by a court of law not to understand the rule of law, not to understand the way in which she is supposed to behave in her office. So I think that the ideas contained in the president's speech are fresh, they're innovative, they are built on the realities of the fact that we have a crisis, but that we can actually, if we are bold enough, use that crisis and turn it into an opportunity. But not enough emphasis was placed on what endangers such a bold move. And what endangers such a bold move is the enemy within. It's those in the African National Congress whose project is still to dislodge a constitutional order, and they've been joined by other rogues from other political parties. So I'm very keen, for example, to see who's going to become the committee chair of SCOPA. Historically, it's always gone to a member of the opposition. Here in the Western Cape, the Democratic Alliance gave that committee to the African National Congress. Yesterday, Mr. Ace Magashule didn't want to confirm that the committee was going to be chaired by the IFP, even though a note had gone out to that effect. He just said the opposition. And we heard from Mr. John Steenhuisen, for example, earlier on, that they are making quite a strong case for the fact that as the official opposition, they should get the committee. Mr. Alf Lees, who've been serving in that committee, as one of the kind of original ones, if you like, with the kind of institutional member. And that committee is critical, for example, to holding Parliament to account. The other committee, of course, is the Ethics Committee. Your very Faith Mutambis, for example, must appear before those committees because of what they did at institutions such as the SABC. And speaking about the SABC, Vuyo, the Minister of Communications yesterday artfully dodged a question put to her by our reporter Samkele Maseko around whether or not we will be looking at black screens, and that is about, what, 7 or 9 million of the 14 million television watchers in this country. And she basically kicked for touch and said it's Treasury's issue. And that's the other thing that we also need to change. Treasury needs to actually be transparent. We know that the markets are very sensitive to what Treasury Treasury official says, but I think we really need to demystify the way in which the public purse is controlled and the way in which monies are spent, because that is actually where you can begin to see whether the government is committing to the programs that it says it will commit to, because if there is no money, then it means the programs cannot work. So if you create a ministry of small business development, but you give it no budget, then you can't expect miracles from that ministry. So I'm also waiting for Mr. Mbowene's address. I'm also waiting for the budget speech of the various ministers so that they can give flesh to the bones that the President put out in the State of the Nation address last night.
Sorry, Vuyo, can I just say this, that don't build new cities, fix the collapsing cities. That's the urgency. The urgency is that businesses are struggling with inefficient local municipalities that are just incompetent for basic things that you need to operate. Small businesses, you don't get that. So fix first the existing cities. Don't build a high-speed rail line. Fix PRASA. Don't give money to SAA. Fix the taxes, subsidize taxes so that working class, ordinary people, poor people, transportation modes are subsidized by the state. Subsidizing SAA, subsidizing me, a business and others. We will fend for ourselves if SAA is gone. A minister might not like this, but the fact of the matter is that we have our thinking in a myopic way. The crisis in PRASA is more pressing than the crisis in SAA. If I had to choose between putting money in PRASA and putting money in SAA, I would put it in PRASA. There's no reason why we're putting billions of rands in an SAA when we could be putting that in sorting out working class public transport system. There's no justification for that.
But you see, in business, if I may also chip in, I'm not a business person, and I'll be a hopeless one, but I have a business person sitting next to me. In business, one doesn't only say that a declining part of the business is what you focus on for the foreseeable future, to the exclusion of looking for new types of businesses that begin to give you the resources to fix that which is number one. Number two, I think those are some of the difficult choices that Mr. Patiana points out that we have to make. But sitting outside of government is one thing. Having the responsibility for the 11,000 people who work at SAA and their future is quite another. PRASA is definitely a priority, there's no doubt about that, particularly in cities like Cape Town. And you have NGOs and civil society that have really highlighted the kind of plight that workers face in cities like this, but elsewhere in the country as well. But it's not necessarily to the exclusion of other things. Put in proper management, get the systems right, maintain the rail tracks, get the right signaling system going. These are all matters that we discussed 7, 8, 9 years ago. Why is it not actually done? And the question here is, who do you hold accountable? Where's the consequence for not doing things right? Where's the consequence for public servants and people who work within SOEs who want to be unaccountable, who think that the state has all the money available to do whatever is required to be done to support malfeasance, corruption, state capture, and so on. And when you don't like what is being done, you then join the Fight Back campaign and make it difficult for us to actually clean up as well. So I think we need to both dream on the one hand and work out the crisis that the globe is finding itself in. So increasingly you'll see the narrative about interest rates declining in the US and elsewhere in the world, that slower growth globally is what we're going to foresee for the next year or so. And it's within this kind of context that we've got to work our way out as a country, not just as the ANC government, but as a country. The question is, can we find common purpose? Can we find the 2 or 3 or 4 things that we agree upon that will help us to get out of this situation that we find ourselves in? Are there going to be obstacles as we go? Within every organization you're going to find them. And it's the art of leadership ultimately, about how do you overcome those obstacles, keep your eye on the vision, attend to those things that the 57 million South Africans actually want, and get the economy moving, get society moving, and do the things in education, in health, and as far as the social wage is concerned, that we need to do and people expect of us as well.
I want to chip in. Minister, you were talking about the fact that the state can't do this alone. People must come to the party. But if we look at the institutions that drive social compacting, if we look at a structure like NEDLAC, for example, it excludes one of the largest trade unions in the country. So you are talking to the converted in many ways. And the social compact isn't replicated in municipalities where, for example, the red tape needs to be removed so that small business can get off the ground. We're looking at the situation, at provinces. I mean, provinces at the moment, in my view, is a place where patronage is, in fact, entrenched. I don't see the logic for provinces to exist with the kind of concurrent powers that they have to stymie the very development. Angie Motshekga said last night on television, it's not her responsibility to build schools. That gets spent at an infrastructure level. Her responsibility is to develop policy. But we didn't get a sense from the minister how teachers are going to be taught how to teach coding, that the president is saying must now become part of the curriculum as we work towards a knowledge-based economy. So I think that the way in which cooperative governance works in South Africa, one, needs to be looked at. And secondly, I think this idea of a national social compact at the top, where we all sign on the dotted line and think we have an actual agreement on paper, but when it comes to implementation, we actually realize that we are far from in agreement is the problem. And that social compact also can't stay at a national level. It needs to be replicated at the coalface of where people experience delivery problems. It needs to go where the tire hits the tar, which is municipalities, and we don't have that. And that is part of why it is difficult for people to put themselves in each other's shoes.
Opening remarks from our panelists. If you've just joined us, you're watching a live broadcast. We're coming live from our Cape Town studios the morning after President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered his State of the Nation address. In a moment, we're going to debate. Don't go away.